Good morning to everyone. It's my great pleasure to be with you this morning. My name is Maria Niemann. I'm the Secretary General of Caritas Europa, and I'm very happy to welcome you here, some of you in person, many of you online, to the launch event of the CARES Report 2021. You will see it in the entrance for those of you who are here on the memory sticks so that you can also bring it with you and go through the details. We will be presenting it today in general lines, and we hope that it will be really helpful also for you as you go ahead. We are also uploading it. It's now available on our website. So for those of you who are joining us online, you will see that it's now launched, and we are really, really happy about that. So this report is about how to make the European labor markets more inclusive. Our report shows the human face of exclusion, with testimonies of lived experience of so many women and men who live on precarious employment conditions, insecurity, people facing unemployment, making it difficult to provide for themselves and for their families. We are trying to show the human face, the person behind the situations of poverty. And the report brings together, it compares, it analyzes the data and the trends of 18 national reports. So there are 18 national poverty reports that have been feeding into this European report. It focuses on the challenges that need to be addressed through policies and actions to ensure that our European labor market really becomes accessible and inclusive. The reports are a part of a series of reports that Caritas Europa is preparing every second year, covering each time a different topic on social policy. These reports allow for the voices of the people experiencing poverty or experiencing exclusion to be brought up to the European level, to the national level. We are allowing for these voices to be heard. And I think it's a good moment to discuss it now. Yesterday was the World Day of Social Justice. And by building inclusive labor markets, we are contributing to that social justice, which is really at the core of Caritas' mission. So I'm very happy to have our president with us today, Landau, coming into Brussels for the purpose, and we are really grateful for that. And Landau will give a bit of an opening to set the scene for the day today. Thank you so much and welcome again.
Thank you, Maria, Secretary General, for giving me the floor. I would also like to welcome the speakers and participants and already thank them for their presence and participation in person or virtually in today's event. I am honored to be part of this launch and look forward to hearing more from the other speakers. I first want to emphasize that Caritas organizations are essential actors in the fight against poverty and social exclusion and for social justice all over Europe. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, Caritas did not close down, and in many cases had to bridge the gap along with other social service providers in order to help those most in need who were not sufficiently supported by national welfare and social protection systems. All Caritas member organizations had to adapt their services due to the pandemic in different ways. The report identifies many of the substantial ways that Caritas provided support during this period. For example, Caritas Austria, as well as other member organizations, developed and scaled up all services that could be provided by telephone or digital means. In Malta, Caritas staff developed and promoted the emergency aid food bank to assist families with, while in Italy, They provided support for online education and distant learning, converted their counseling and psychological support to be digitalized, and activated specific economic support through dedicated diocesan funds to support the most urgent expenses of beneficiaries. In Luxembourg, Caritas put in place a helpline to respond to increased requests for housing and homeless shelters. Caritas support is further evident by many promising practices presented in the national reports, as well as at Caritas' recent Innovation Festival, and some of which are included in the European report. There are many inspiring examples that clearly show that Caritas is a learning network ready to show the positive and share the positive experiences. Caritas organizations assist and provide services to people in situations of vulnerability in many different ways. And taking the experience of daily work as a starting point, Caritas strives for more justice in social and economic structures, policies, and measures. The research compiled in the Caritas Cares Poverty Reports, again starting from practice and grassroots experience throughout Europe, should serve as an important instrument in Caritas Europa's efforts to right unjust structures, contribute to policy development and measures, and fill the gaps towards creating a more just and equal Europe that leaves no one behind. Within Catholic social teachings, socioeconomic activities must operate within a broader framework of respect for human dignity, honesty and accountability, fairness, and a vision of integral and authentic human development that goes beyond mere material profits. In this context, for Caritas Europa, the economy must serve people, not the other way around. In the same way, work is more than a way of making a living. It's a form of integral human development, fostering participation in society. This necessitates the protection of the dignity of work, an inclusive labor market, and a human-centered economy, in line with the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, and with respect to church teachings, which put people and planet at the center of the economic system. Dear Commissioner, we are honored by your presence. Dear colleagues and friends, what we experienced could be summed up in 3 points. Firstly, in recent years, pre-pandemic, most European Union member countries, including Austria, experienced increased employment due to economic growth, which seems to be recovering again along general lines. But the COVID-19 pandemic stopped this trend and had a dramatic impact also on the labor market. And as we see in our work, for many people, this health crisis has turned into a social crisis. The Caritas member organizations unanimously reported that many of their new clients never thought that they would ever need to rely on Caritas services. I think we need to stay vigilant and prepared, as for some people, the worst might be still to come in order to keep pace in challenging times. For instance, as accumulated savings are spent, as costs of energy and daily life increase, or as long-term unemployment becomes increasingly more difficult to overcome. This brings up the second key point, namely that those from disadvantaged backgrounds who were often already in precarious and difficult situations before COVID emerged faced even greater hardships. For instance, the long-term unemployed, informal workers, older workers, women, persons with disabilities, migrants, and young people needs, no education, employment, or training, were particularly affected by the consequences of the pandemic. COVID-19 has further reinforced the pre-existing inequalities and gaps in the European labor market and posed additional risks and challenges to those in the most vulnerable situations in society. The third key point I want to highlight is in regard to the short-time work schemes and alternative forms of job preservation mechanisms implemented by the European Union and its member states to limit job losses and save people's livelihoods. The importance of a well-functioning social protection and welfare system has clearly been demonstrated, something we believe needs to continue to be further strengthened. In fact, we need both individual and structural solidarity. Nevertheless, the recently released European Commission Cohesion Report states that since 2019, an additional 5 million people are at risk of poverty or social exclusion. Poverty is still a reality for many whose wages are insufficient to meet living costs, whose jobs were lost, whose skills and qualifications are unrecognized, who cannot find a job due to varying factors. Here, attention needs to be focused and tailored to be person-centered. I'm personally convinced economic performance and the quality of social security are two pillars of the same bridge. The bridge needs both pillars, based on the spirit of global responsibility with respect to worldwide fraternity and with regard to creation as our common home. Dear participants, today's event aims to shine light on some of these challenges and their effects on people's daily lives, and to discuss ways by which to address these challenges and policy gaps through additional policy development, effective implementation of existing policies and measures, and the promoting of promising practices so that everyone can be included and live in dignity. So allow me to mention in the end just a few more concrete points that I think are of importance on national as well as on European level. Unfortunately, being employed does not always mean earning enough money to enjoy a decent living. In-work poverty still is a big issue that needs to be tackled. We see the importance of adequate minimum wages that allow a decent living, set either through statutory minimum wages or through collective bargaining and collective agreements, and are thus hopeful in regard to current negotiations on the forthcoming minimum wage directive. Or another field, social economy is important in the work of many Caritas member organizations. National legal frameworks on social economy differ and are often not sufficiently integrated into strategic policymaking. The EU Action Plan on Social Economy will hopefully promote the importance and positive effects of social economy on society and environment. This needs stronger models of cooperation by consolidating and strengthening a regular, permanent, and structured dialogue with social economy organizations in order to promote them, monitor their progress, and remove the barriers to their development still existing. In the beginning of March 2021, the European Commission launched a new strategy on the rights of persons with disabilities for 2030. The grassroots experience from civil society organizations such as Caritas working in this field in various local initiatives and projects, and from local authority and regional administrations should be used when implementing the strategy across all European Union member states. or a next important issue, people in the European Union are living longer, and though they are generally healthy, long-term care needs are nevertheless growing. Our experience demonstrates that investment in the social care sector is greatly needed, with a particular focus on post-communist European Union countries, where little funding has been allocated until now. In addition, and I would like to stress this, in addition, considering the migratory component of ensuring fair care work in Europe, it's also vital to provide European solutions, not just national ones. Social and labor market policies should ensure fair mobility and legal channels of migration for live-in care workers, as well as a common standard-setting framework, including workers' rights and duties, including access to social protection, but also taking into account the needs and realities in the countries of origin of live-in care workers, for instance. What we see, different European Union labor market policies are already in place or will be in the next years to address different vulnerable groups. For example, the reinforced youth guarantee, the EU Action Plan on Integration and Inclusion, the European Union Anti-Racism Plan, and so on. Most Caritas member organizations and also Caritas Austria see the need to further emphasize the importance of those measures to be adequately implemented in the national legal frameworks. Dear participants, as I said in the beginning, Caritas organizations had to focus on the most urgent needs of the beneficiaries, which was quite often just food aid, shelter accommodation, or house and utility payment support, adapting services. What I wish to emphasize, I am convinced that job creation alone will not be enough to bring us through the recovery. People are suffering, and social protection is needed. We know until now country-specific recommendations in the past have largely focused on economic reforms rather than on social concerns. This year, with the Recovery and Resilience Facility, there should naturally be more focus on recommendations on social and ecological reforms and investments. We would consider that a good step forward with regard to these country-specific recommendations. As Caritas Europa, we stand for a Europe which encompasses more than the European Union. But we see and experience the European Union can and does make a difference for this broader Europe and for the people in need. In that sense, I look very much forward to the coming hours, and a warm welcome to all once again, also from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Landau, for emphasizing so clearly the importance of putting the person at the center in all the policies, in all the initiatives that we are taking to ensure that we truly have inclusive labor markets. Thanks also for showing a little bit of the work that Caritas has done to respond to some of these situations and some of these needs. And now it's my pleasure to also give the floor to some of the experiences from our members at the national level. And first to Gosha Crisanto, who is a board member and a supervising case advisor at Caritas Cyprus. She's joining us virtually. To hear, good morning, Gosha.
Good morning.
Some of the labor market challenges of especially undocumented migrants in Cyprus. So thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to today's discussion with a comment on the labor market challenges. faced by some of Europe's most vulnerable groups, migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. I do so from the front lines in Cyprus, where Caritas is one of the few grassroots organizations working to fill gaps in the social safety net that has not been able to keep pace with the increasing number of new arrivals. Cyprus is currently receiving more asylum seekers per capita than any other EU member state. These newcomers join the ranks of other migrant groups struggling to navigate a tight and regulated labor market on a small divided island. They, like we, recognize that a job is often the key to short-term survival and long-term integration alike. It should not go unnoticed that I am the one speaking to you today, rather than someone directly affected by a myriad of labor market shortcomings. This reflects a reality that is hard to accept, that most asylum seekers and refugees are or feel excluded from the labor market, if not society more generally. So much so that they do not feel comfortable speaking out themselves. We were unsuccessful in listing some of our most articulate and outspoken beneficiaries to join us today. They simply do not feel comfortable. It is true that some have been able to secure gainful employment. Here, I must note, however, that only a few low-paying, back-breaking sectors of the economy are open to asylum seekers in Cyprus, regardless of the economy's needs and of the skills on offer. It is our experience that most, working or unemployed, do not want to be seen as complaining about their host country. Some keep quiet out of respect, content to be far from the circumstances that caused them to flee. Unfortunately, though, most do not speak out because they fear possible reprisals or surrender to the sense of futility. It isn't that they are not working under difficult and unsafe conditions. It isn't that they are earning a decent wage and are free from exploitation and discrimination. It isn't that they have EU-compliant workplaces or contracts. No, it is that they are afraid. If I complain about my conditions, I will be fired. I might not get my passport back from my employer. I won't be paid back wages. Where will I go when they turn me out? I will have to go on the run. I may get deported. I will be considered a troublemaker and won't be employed again. Worse, many are silent because they feel that there is no point in complaining. The police know how terrible the conditions are on the farm where I work. They know this isn't really a restaurant. The labor officer knows the employer doesn't provide a contract, withholds pay, pays below what is reported, or doesn't pay at all. From the start, employment processes must include and safeguard the employee as well as the employer. As is in Cyprus, the employer holds all the cards, and an employee's fate rests on the diligence and goodwill of his or her employer. An employee cannot even verify if his or her employer has registered her as required by law. This is just one way that results in exploitation, and about which the employee cannot complain for fear of being penalized, while the employer gets away with impunity. During employment, there is no follow-up on working conditions, proper registration and compliance, even when employees are referred to jobs by the labor office. Labor officers just link employees to employers, that's it. Inspections are rare and focus solely on documentation, not on work conditions, except in a few extreme cases that qualify for human trafficking for labor exploitation. To improve labor inclusivity, there must be fair labor practices and standards. All forms of discrimination must be confronted and combated. Beyond the existing framework, there must be fair implementation and consistent enforcement. Labor authorities must scrutinize workplaces and employer practices just as they do employee documentation. People found working illegally should have access to the complaint procedure all the same. It must be ensured that the worker is not penalized as a result of a complaint by losing the job and any owed wages, while the employer just moves on to engaging, if not outright exploiting, the next person. All workers should have access to a complaints procedure, and the culture of the workplace itself must be inclusionary and equitable. And there must be effective recourse for workers who have no hope of reaching a courtroom to resolve their disputes, especially financial. The CARES reports shine a much needed light on some of these issues, which must be discussed not only amongst us today, but pursued by leaders in Brussels and capitals like Nicosia, in order to ensure safe, inclusive, and productive labor markets in Europe. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Gosha, and thank you for illustrating so clearly the serious challenges of migrants and asylum seekers in Cyprus, often not sufficiently known and not heard. And we heard that this is also sometimes due to fear of repercussions, fear. And thank you also for the clear calls for action on how to address this. Now we're going to have two video testimonies that we have received from Caritas Italy, so Caritas Italiana. There are testimonies of two persons in Italy, a man in Bologna and a woman near Naples, who lost their jobs because of the pandemic. During the first lockdown, they faced financial difficulties and turned to Caritas Italiana to get financial support. But in these videos, they also explain how important it was to them to know that their local Caritas was there to help. Thank you.
Il 10 marzo 2020 è la data che ha cambiato tutta la mia vita e la vita di tutti noi. È iniziato tutto con la chiusura della nostra attività e questo ha inciso tantissimo perché la cassa integrazione era una cosa che non mi sarei mai aspettato, di dover comunicare ai ragazzi. Anche dal punto di vista personale e familiare le cose sono cambiate tantissimo nel periodo di lockdown, che tutti pensavamo fosse un periodo di pochi giorni, di poche settimane. Invece poi col passare del tempo, col vedere il conto corrente aziendale che andava sempre più giù, senza incassi ma con tante spese, la mia situazione psicologica è cambiata tantissimo, tant'è che fissavo continuamente dalla finestra di casa il locale e solo la forza e la vicinanza della mia famiglia hanno fatto in modo che restassi lucido e che non andassi incontro a situazioni psicologiche più gravi. Questo è l'inizio del periodo delle consegne a domicilio. Mi ha fatto vedere quello che succedeva comunque intorno per le strade, la gente che veniva a chiedere un pasto. Allora lì ho pensato di aiutare, nonostante la situazione difficile nostra, ho pensato di aiutare delle famiglie e questo ha fatto sì che è cominciata, diciamo, la collaborazione con la Caritas e questo ha inciso positivamente sia su di me sia sul gruppo con cui lavoro, perché aiutare gli altri ci ha aiutati ad andare avanti e a proseguire e a lottare, perché magari aiutare voleva dire anche aiutarci. Col prosieguo della pandemia eccetera, noi abbiamo comunque sempre lottato per riuscire a mantenere aperta la nostra attività e il patto San Petronio è stato una cosa inaspettata, nel senso che noi comunque non mi sarei mai aspettato che aiutando gli altri poi alla fine arrivasse qualcuno che aiutasse anche noi.
About the issue there were with the subtitles in the beginning. I think it illustrated very beautifully, and perhaps we can also put our text on our website to ensure that you will have access to this testimony very clearly, and the video testimony as well. I think it showed also very beautifully how, through these challenges, this person who had facing these needs that were unexpected, were able also to challenge and to change the situation into a situation where he could also then use this moment to also support other persons. Can we put the second video? Thank you.
Mi chiamo Sara Scotto, sono separata e ho 2 figlie. Non ho i genitori perché purtroppo li ho persi in giovane età, e all'inizio della separazione mi sono trovata con grosse difficoltà, 2 figli da crescere, casa sulle spalle, senza lavoro, e quindi ho chiesto aiuto al parroco della mia parrocchia, il quale si è messo in contatto subito con la Caritas di Pozzuoli. E devo dire la verità, l'aiuto della Caritas è stato tempestivo, innanzitutto a livello morale, perché comunque mi ha risollevato psicologicamente, perché ero crollata a causa delle enormi difficoltà da superare da sola, e anche nell'aiuto per la casa, per pagare un affitto, la bolletta della luce, i viveri, insomma. E devo dire la verità, è stato un aiuto basilare. Purtroppo durante la pandemia ho riavuto questi problemi, come il resto dell'umanità, perché all'improvviso ci siamo trovati tutti senza lavoro, senza sapere che fare, e ancora una volta ho bussato alla porta della Caritas di Pozzuoli, e ancora una volta Don Alberto mi ha aiutato veramente con il cuore, veramente in tutti i sensi, a 360 gradi, anche psicologicamente, perché comunque eravamo demoralizzati tutti, ed è stato un aiuto benefico, perché comunque mi ha risollevata, giustamente avendo una casa da pagare, l'affitto, 2 ragazze da portare avanti, la bolletta della luce, quello che in una casa bisogna fare. La Caritas non si è mai tirata indietro, e io ringrazio tutti. Oggigiorno io mi sono risollevato un pochettino, ogni tanto comunque ho ancora dei problemi perché c'è ancora la pandemia in giro, quindi il lavoro scarseggia, le spese ci sono, le ragazze da portare avanti ci sono, e quindi ogni tanto vengo a bussare alla porta della casa di Pozzuoli, la quale è sempre pronta a tenermi una mano in tutti i sensi, e io la ringrazio con il cuore.
So much. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the Caritas. I know that many of you are joining us online. Thank you for having been there during this pandemic. This goes for Caritas, this goes for social service providers. I think we had to take a role which was extremely important. And I think it also shows the importance of recognition of social services, of investing in social services. So thanks for not having closed during the lockdown. Thanks for having been there for the people who needed it the most. You have seen a couple of testimonies on just how important that has been. And we don't know what would have happened for all these people wouldn't organizations such as Caritas have been there in this difficult situation. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker today. It's Helena Dalli, who is Commissioner for Equality in the European Commission. So Mrs. Dalli, you have heard a little bit now about some of the challenges that people have been facing during the pandemic, some of the challenges that there are in relation to access to the labor market, inclusion in the labor market, situations that have been just worsened by the pandemic. So you as a commissioner, how is the European Commission responding to some of these issues in a more systemic way? What is the policy response, and what are you suggesting for the next steps? So thank you so much for being with us, and over to you.
Thank you. First of all, I really thank you for your report, which you released today, and I welcome your focus on the challenges that member states must address towards making Europe accessible and inclusive for all. During the past 2 years, Europeans, as we have seen, have suffered from the COVID-19 pandemic's devastating social and economic consequences. And I must say our swift intervention helped mitigate the pandemic's worst impacts on household income, avoiding the risk of severe material and social deprivation. Yet, as highlighted in your report, many challenges remain, and the pandemic's labor market impact is uneven. For instance, affecting acutely those in precarious work conditions. Indeed, your report exposes many stories of people who found themselves in vulnerable situations. While some of us do enjoy the benefits of working from home, remote work has also placed a higher burden on women. Women were often already limited to temporary or part-time employment because of their higher caring responsibilities, which is a key factor contributing to the gender pay gap. Evidence shows that mothers have to deal with more child interruptions than fathers, for instance, when doing telework. And this can affect their career progression, productivity, and pay. The pandemic has also highlighted women's indispensable role in essential frontline sectors, such as the care and educational sectors. And not all workers certainly can work safely from home. Migrants, for instance, are overrepresented in jobs that are less transferable to telework. Consequently, the pandemic affected the labor market situation more severely than that of native workers. As your research indicates, the pandemic reversed some of the positive socioeconomic recent pre-pandemic years. For instance, access to employment and income is a major issue for many marginalized Roma communities and individuals. The pandemic their situation. On the other hand, Roma hardly benefited from the national employment support. And on the other hand, discrimination combined with low levels of education continues to hinder their employment prospects. The pandemic has also disproportionately affected persons with disabilities. It has aggravated pre-existing exclusion risks, notably in terms of access to employment, healthcare, education, and online support services. As European countries progressively scale back restrictions, it is important to identify not only those who have been hit hardest by the crisis, but also which groups face a long road to recovery and provide them dedicated assistance. European Pillar of Social Rights continues to be our guide for an inclusive recovery in our employment and social policies. In 2020, EU leaders at the Porto summit set 3 ambitious headline targets: to increase the EU's employment rate by 10% to 78%, to ensure that 6 out of 10 adults participate in training or education each year, and to lift over 15 million citizens out of poverty and social exclusion. At least 5 million of these people will be children. Moreover, our new strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities, which has been mentioned earlier, which has strong links to the social pillar, announced concrete initiatives to improve the lives of persons with disabilities in the EU. Later this year, the Commission will present a package to improve labor market outcomes for persons with disabilities. This package will provide guidance and support to persons with disabilities in several ways. To name a few examples, member states will strengthen the capacity of their employment and integration services, promote hiring opportunities through affirmative action, combat stereotypes, ensure reasonable accommodation, and secure health and safety at work, and advocacy and rehabilitation schemes. The implementation of the EU Action Plan on Integration and Inclusion will contribute to the improvement of the integration of migrants and refugees in their countries of residence, with a focus on education, employment, health, and housing. The post-pandemic recovery is also an opportunity to improve gender equality. The Commission is modernizing EU legislation to strengthen fairness at work. In 2020, we tabled a proposal for a directive on adequate minimum wages in the EU. This initiative will contribute to narrowing the gender pay gap as more women than men earn the minimum wage. This is also an opportunity to recognize the contribution of essential workers who are mainly women and who often earn just the statutory minimum wage. Since women carry out the bulk of caring activities in our societies, investment in the care sector is a precondition for gender equality. This year, the Commission will present a new European care strategy to support men and women find the best care and the best work-life balance for carers. We will also closely follow the transposition of the Work-Life Balance Directive that is set for August 2022. In the EU, discrimination in the area of employment on the grounds of sex, racial or ethnic origin, religion or belief, disability, age or sexual orientation is prohibited. Yet, as recently recalled in the Commission's third report regarding the application of the Employment and Racial Equality Directives, a number of major gaps remain. These include the low awareness of rights and of support mechanisms, victims' fear of retaliation, shortage of evidence to prove discrimination, and low levels of compensation by the perpetrators of discrimination. So the Commission will continue to work closely with member states, equality bodies, the Fundamental Rights Agency, civil society organizations, and social partners to fight discrimination. Acknowledging the importance of national equality bodies in the promotion of equality, we are currently assessing whether to propose new legislation to strengthen their role during 2022. The Commission is pleased to note that the report acknowledges the important role played by the European Social Fund Plus in advancing social inclusion in member states. With a budget of over 99 billion euros, the ESF Plus is our main tool to financially support labor market integration, education and training, and social inclusion. Dear participants and members of the Caritas organization, thank you for the useful information put forward in this report. The evidence and recommendations collected within it will contribute towards our policy reflections as we are working towards building inclusive labor markets. Caritas organizations are essential stakeholders in the fight against poverty and social exclusion, and we count on your continued support in the years ahead. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Dalli. You can indeed count on our support. Thank you also for the recognition of Caritas and for some of the recommendations that we have been preparing that we hope will feed into the policy making as we go ahead. You were shedding light on some of the most excluded groups that are facing particular challenges. And you were mentioning some of the initiatives that you are taking that are really important and for which we also thank you and are grateful for. Initiatives that will support the inclusion of women, of migrants, of people with disabilities, Roma people, and so on. And now I think it might be time to present a little bit about our recommendations. Many of the thoughts and many of the initiatives that the Commissioner was referring to are also within our priority areas. We have some more thoughts as well, and I'm handing over the floor to my colleague Shannon Pfohman, our Policy and Advocacy Director, who will be presenting the main conclusions and findings of our report.
Thanks, Maria. You can hear me, right? Yes, perfect. It's an honor to finally be able to speak about the findings of our report, but actually many things have already been referred to. Maybe one thing to add is that the report was drafted together with Chiara Capaldi of IRS Consulting in Italy, and also with the staff of Caritas Europa. Special thanks goes to my colleague Lucy Ans in the back of the room. Now also to identify some of the things that haven't been said, essentially the report documents that the way the work has changed across Europe. Work has changed across Europe, and there's been a gradual erosion in the general quality and security of employment over the years. Already before the pandemic, and even more so today, many particular groups face greater structural barriers on the labor market and much higher unemployment rates than the general working population. References have already been made to some, but not all of them. Commissioner Dalli mentioned the Roma, the situation of women, the situation of persons with disabilities. Well, not surprising is also the situation of young people, especially from disadvantaged backgrounds and needs, those not in education or employment, who often have inadequate or poor quality education, thus limiting their chances on the labor market. According to our findings, 25% of young adults struggle to find a job or be invited to a job interview because they lack the previous professional experience. Migrants compose another population group that is often concentrated in precarious jobs. In some cases, they may have lower qualifications, but in many cases, they are actually forced to work below their qualification level due to discrimination, challenges having their previous degrees and qualifications recognized, as well as employers' hesitancy to carry out the administrative tasks necessary for them to procure a work permit. Consequently, they are at greatest risk of of exploitation, not employment. Roma people, as has been mentioned, face discrimination as well, often having limited work experience and not always having access to legal documents. This was one of the findings in the research, which naturally impairs their chances on the labor market. Mentioned already, but I repeat, women are often frequently confined to temporary or part-time employment due to caring responsibilities that aren't recognized by the state and still suffer from a pay gap compared with male colleagues. Due to this job insecurity, lower pay, career interruptions, and unequal caring responsibilities, women are also more likely to struggle financially after retirement as a result. Which is a topic that's being discussed with the new care strategy, but let's see how it can be tackled. Our findings also show that persons with disabilities, unfortunately, have very low employment rates, which ties them into low incomes and dependency on the state for support. One topic that hasn't been mentioned is, or one population group, the non-standard employment and informal workers. Caritas Cyprus mentioned it or referred to it, but not specifically said it. They particularly suffer from low wages, precarious and unsafe working conditions, and exploitation. Care workers are also among the category of workers who often are underpaid and undervalued, with many working via informal contracts. And interestingly, in the discussions on the care strategy, the connection to migrant care workers is rare. So that's something that needs further attention. Finally, older workers have likewise experienced labor market barriers in many cases due to what is perceived as outdated skills, especially digital skills, and they consequently struggle to access workplaces. None of this is very surprising. I think you know this already, you read about it, but it confirms the reality. And this, what I'm describing, is all pre-COVID. So what happened during the pandemic, of course, worsened the realities for these groups. So during the pandemic and between the fourth quarter of 2019 and the first quarter of 2021, employment fell, affecting 4.6 million people, among which were more than 1 million young workers. The socioeconomic fallout of the pandemic exacerbated the challenges that many of these workers were already facing. Overall, the pandemic has led to vast job losses, reduced working opportunities, increased competition, increased health risks for frontline workers, abusive working conditions due to increased working time, depending on the sector, for instance, care, exploitation of workers without regular contracts, and no social protection. The initial lockdown restrictions also left many migrants and care workers stranded, while they and Roma people typically struggled to work as a result of the border closures, which had a great impact on people's employment opportunities. The overrepresentation of women in the sectors hit by the pandemic and in lower paid and part-time employment also had placed them in more vulnerable situations, which has been mentioned. We've already talked about the many practices and ways Caritas organizations stepped in during the pandemic, so I'll skip over that. But I do want to emphasize again what Michael Landau already highlighted, is that many of our members who were working on labor market inclusion and job training and skills upscaling, they had to put that on hold during the pandemic in order to respond to the emergency needs of so many people who struggled to survive and to pay their basic utility bills, their housing rents, and also to just feed themselves and their children. So this became one of kind of the emergency situations during the pandemic, which of course also skewed the findings in our data, because many of the Caritas had to focus first and foremost on this emergency situation. And again, it emphasizes that much more than just job creation and employment is going to help us move through the recovery of this pandemic. So now to some of the recommendations, because time is tight. Many of the initiatives that we've been considering and analyzing in this publication have been referenced already, such as the Reinforced Youth Guarantee, the Action Plan on Integration and Inclusion, the EU Action Plan on Anti-Racism, and hopefully the soon to be adopted Directive on Adequate Minimum Wages. So our poverty report includes analyses on other policy initiatives of the EU as well. And we have 18 policy recommendations overall. And I just want to highlight a few. Clearly, we recommend introducing an EU framework directive on minimum income and ensuring that social protection systems are inclusive and accessible to everyone. This is imperative considering what I've just told you about the emergency responses that were required of the Caritas organizations. We need to scale up in ensuring minimum income that is legally binding. Policymakers need to invest not only in active labor market measures, but also in the social protection for all, ensuring a minimum income and individualized services to help those in the most vulnerable situations. Second, we recommend the EU and member states to prioritize the educational training, qualifications, and skilling of people in situations of vulnerability in order to improve their active participation in the labor market. Here, implementing the Social Economy Action Plan and ensuring the interlink to skilling and reskilling would likewise be essential. It's vital to ensure that such training is adapted to the capacities and desires of individuals and promotes equal treatment and non-discrimination. We recommend increased political will and public investment in labor inspections and judicial institutions as well, in order to enforce existing rules and regulations around informal work. Member states need to sanction employers who violate the law, offer incentives to employers to hire workers on formal contracts, grant secure and sustainable resident statuses, and expand regularization possibilities for undocumented workers. A fourth recommendation, and the last one that I'll mention today, is that the EU and member states recognize civil society organizations as official providers of tailored and inclusive employment of social services, so they can benefit from sustainable government funding and institutional support. That's important to mention because during the pandemic, Caritas stepped in, provided emergency responses, but suffered themselves in terms of ensuring the funding that was needed for these social services, especially as some of the activities that they had been budgeted for were not able to be implemented, and so their funding at national level was cut. So that's really important to continue to prioritize in the future of the planning for resilience. We have many more recommendations. I encourage you to please have a look at the online publication so you can see them. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them in the question and answer session. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for summarizing so well some of the key findings and key recommendations of our poverty report. So how can some of these recommendations and findings be translated in practice? What does inclusion in the labor market really mean? So we have one example that we are going to present to you now, thanks to Birgit Reingruber, who is the head of the Inigo Handel of Caritas Austria. So you will hear about Caritas Austria's partnership with SPAR in supporting people who are long-term unemployed. Well,
thank you, Maria. Thank you for your invitation and the chance to tell you more about our work in Inigo Handel. Let me share.
Is there a means to have a little bit of a louder volume from your side? We cannot hear you very well.
Okay. Does it work better now?
Not really. Is there something that can be done from this side?
Okay.
If you try perhaps without the headphones to see if that can help.
Okay, let me try it this way. Is it better now?
It's a little bit better, yeah.
A bit better. Oh. Let me share my presentation with you. I'm very proud to present.
I think you will need to speak very close to the microphone.
Okay, so let me try again with the headphones because I tried them.
No, it worked. Now it works.
I tried the headphones and is it better now? Okay.
Yes, now please.
I won't cry to you. So let me tell you about our social economy enterprise and the cooperation between SPAR and Caritas in Austria. But to start, let me tell you the story about Aldibo Abdul Karim. Born in Syria, he moved to Austria in 2016 with his wife and their 4 children. After 1.5 years in a refugee camp, the family moved to Vienna. Mr. Aldibo attended several German courses and was looking for a job. From a friend, he heard about Inigo Handel and joined our team in March last year. Working in retail offered him the chance to start his professional career in Austria. The cooperation between SPAR and Caritas started in 2007, and meanwhile, Caritas runs 10 SPAR supermarkets in 5 Austrian provinces. All these markets have one common goal, which is to integrate disadvantaged groups into the labor market. The target groups are long-term unemployed people, people 50 plus, migrants, and people with disabilities. In Vienna, Caritas opened the first supermarket in 2016 and another one 2 years later. These markets look like any other SPAR supermarket. They sell the same products and use the same tools and workflows. We are a multi-professional team of social workers, coaches, administrative staff, as well as professionals in trade. Caritas acts as a retailer and has a cooperation with SPAR as well as with the Public Employment Service in Austria, the IMS. Caritas acts as a wholesaler, SPAR acts as a wholesaler, gives support, and is the main further employer of our trainees. In this project, we managed to cover 80% of our costs, which means operating costs and salaries, And for our labor market policy mandate, we receive fundings from the IMS. Currently, we have the resources to offer 49 jobs for 6 months for long-term unemployed people. And our program includes training on the job as well as coaching and outplacement. Qualified professionals help our trainees to develop skills relevant to the food retailing. And in addition, social workers and coaches help them with issues like unsecured housing, debt regulation, organizing childcare, health coaching applications, and job search. The goal is to integrate our trainees into the regular labor market, preferably to jobs at Spar. What do we see as key indicators for our success? First of all, there are many available jobs and good career opportunities in food retail, and the work is relatively easy to learn, even for newcomers and for those with low educational skills. There is a long-lasting and trusting cooperation between IMS and Caritas, as well as between Caritas and Spar. I think we offer realistic training situations in our markets and consider the training period of 6 months as appropriate. Pre-selection of the candidates and coaching help to improve the sustainable integration into the labor market. In the last 5 years, we trained 391 people in our 2 markets. 229 of them found a regular job after training, which means a placement rate of approximately 60%. In comparison, similar projects in Vienna reach placement rates about 25 to 30%. So everyone profits from this cooperation. For the employees, we offer realistic training conditions, support, and a very good chance to find a regular job in a big Austrian retail company. Besides that, our program helps them to improve their self-esteem and their personal situation. Spar gets well-trained employees who are able to work independently from day 1 on and profits from pre-selection. And Caritas reaches placement figures about 60% even in the last 2 years. As we all know, the pandemic had a huge impact on the labor markets. What we saw in Inigo Handel was that our employees were very proud of having a job and being considered as heroes of the pandemic, especially in the first few months. Now the working environment in retail has become quite challenging. The employees face problems like being insulted by customers, sudden staff absence due to quarantine and illness, and heavy workload. On the other hand, they experience that jobs in food retail are system relevant and crisis proof. Finally, let me tell you how it continued for Mr. Aldivo. He was very motivated to learn and did very well in training. During his 6 months with us, he organized housing benefits and childcare places and found a regular job in a daily food department in a Spar supermarket. When he visited my colleagues a few weeks ago, he asked for his wife to start also the trainee program when her German is good enough. And so our aim and daily motivation is to have many more successful stories like Mr. Altibo's in the future. And thank you for your attention. Oops.
Much, Birgit. Thank you, and congratulations also for such a successful project, which is, as you say, a win-win situation, which inclusion often is. It's a win-win. Thank you also for sharing the personal story. Now we have seen and we have heard from people experiencing poverty and exclusion, some of the challenges also identified by our Caritas organizations across Europe. We have heard of some of the recommendations on how to address some of these challenges. And now is the moment to have a conversation with a small panel, which we will have on the screen. We have 4 speakers for this discussion. And it's also an opportunity now, I think, for you to feed in those who are joining virtually. Feel free also to fill in some questions into the chat as we go. We will have a proper question answer session just after. But we hope that this will really be a bit of a discussion between the panelists, but also with your contributions. So I'm pleased to introduce to you the participants of the panel. We have Flaviana Theodosio, who is the team leader at DG Employment, European Commission, so the unit on social protection. So very warm welcome. We also have Miroslav Fuchs, who is Labour and Social Policy Attaché at the Permanent Representation of the Czech Republic to the European Union. So also a warm welcome. And we have Marina Monaco, who is Advisor on Social Protection, Social Inclusion and EU Funds at the European Trade Union Confederation. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. And we have Saskia Bricmont, who is a member of the European Parliament from the Greens Group, member of the LIBE Committee, that's the Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs Committee. So also a very warm welcome to you and thank you for being with us. So to kick off the debate, I think you have heard a couple of times already in this morning how important it is to ensure that we have adequate minimum wages allowing for people to live in dignity, to provide for themselves and for their families. And the European Commission was proposing a directive on minimum wages. It's a directive that also as Caritas we are working very actively on. It's now in the stage of trialogue between the European Parliament, the European Commission and the Council of Ministers. So once approved, if approved, what impact do you think, what impact do you expect that it will have across the European Union? What can a person, the persons listening to us right now, what can they expect from that directive? Will it be the game changer that would allow for people across the European Union to once and for all be able to have wages that are adequate, allow for them to live in dignity? Can I open the floor perhaps by inviting our representative from the European Parliament? So Saskia Bricmont, very welcome. Would you like to react to this or perhaps some of the other things you have been learning or hearing this morning? Very welcome.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you to Caritas and the whole team for this invitation to speak about the poverty report you issued and the very interesting and sometimes shocking testimonies that we've heard this morning. Yes, maybe a global thought, if I may, before to come to the directive on minimum wages. You know that fighting against poverty, homelessness and inclusive labor market is very important to me and to the Green Group also. And I think it's needed in the global fight for social justice. And this is also part of the feminist Europe that we are fighting for. And organizations like Caritas are essential actors in this fight and remain also key to raise political awareness. And I'm happy I've heard Commissioner this morning about the next steps that are to be taken to address all the issues and challenges that you have raised. But I really think that still, for the moment, 2022, and after this pandemic and in a recovery perspective, Europe is not yet putting social justice at the top of its political agenda where it should do so to really make the difference. So coming to the directive on minimum wages, it's an historical fight for us. So we are happy that this step is taken and that this trialogue is ongoing. And I think it first and foremost sends the message that Europe is not powerless when it comes to social policies and social legislation. So I think this is the first message I would like to send. It's also important in the context of the European Year of the Youth, because 2022 is the year of the youth, knowing, and you pointed rightfully in your report that it also disproportionately affects youth at risk of poverty, but it's also in the global fight for gender equality that this is also important to address young female workers that are even more at risk of poverty. Also, and please, Maria, make a sign when I have to stop, because I know the time is short, but it's so broad. I think there are also other consequences. It will protect workers in countries where there is no minimum wages. And this is also important. By improving the wage gap, we will reduce the unemployment trap. And this all will contribute to the recovery, because these workers show a higher propensity to consume, and in times of high inflation, it is important to hedge them, especially now against the backdrop of energy price hikes. So countering energy poverty is a major challenge. It's also important because we know that financial hardships of adults create anxiety and adversely and surprisingly affect the behavior and emotional health of their children, and to an even greater extent that their educational attainment. So even temporary financial setbacks can have long-lasting consequences on children and the grown-up they will become. So this is also important to address to avoid the consequences for children.
Thank you, Saskia. You were speaking about this as a historical fight. So that's very great that we are at this moment where we can make a historical change. You were speaking about not all of the countries having a minimum wage, and definitely not all of the countries, even those having a minimum wage, is allowing for people to live in dignity. We still have a lot of working poor. What about the European Trade Union Confederation? Marina, what are your reactions to this?
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the very interesting and valuable data that you have displayed so clearly and sharply in the report. Actually, you can imagine how the TUC is engaged in the fight to get fair and higher minimum wages across Europe. And the reasons for that are partly also reprised in your report. 7 out of 10 workers on minimum wages still find it difficult to make ends meet. Without mentioning the fact that people who work in Europe, who face poverty in spite of having a job, ranged around 8% in the last decade, and are still increasing in this decade. We're between 9 and 10%. We also have to consider that countries where this happens also in countries where one wouldn't say that such a wage stagnation represents a problem. We talk about Germany, Italy, Spain, important and representative member states for the EU, let alone then let's imagine what happens in countries where we joined the European Union more recently. Then we have to take into consideration that across all EU, there is a huge amount of essential workers like carers, cleaners, but we've seen health workers, agriculture workers who earn only very, very low minimum wages. So the idea of setting up a higher, fair fairer minimum wage settlement across Europe means to push up pay for all low-wage workers, and as evidence has shown, also to push up not only the number of employed people, but also the working conditions of those who are covered by collective agreements. And this is crucial because it is important to keep into consideration that where collective bargaining is present and where collective bargaining is announced by a minimum standard which is already fair, the economy performs better. It's not new that the economy is based on internal demands. When poverty and wage stagnation, on the contrary, are crystallized, there is a very high difficulty for countries not only to develop economically and socially, more importantly, but also it's much more difficult for them to face the economic, social shocks like the one of the pandemic. So the higher statutory minimum wages are important to be established in order to foster a stronger collective bargaining that would boost the economic recovery and would make it, most importantly, truly inclusive and truly at the service of European people and workers.
Thank you so much. So higher statutory wages are important to allow for true inclusion. In the end, it is at the member state level that these measures will have to be accepted and implemented. And it would be interesting also to hear from the perspective of Miroslav Fuchs as representing the Czech Republic to the European Union. How are you reacting to these questions? And I also would like to remind participants, also those joining us virtually, that you are free also now to add questions to the chat, which can then be questions either towards the previous speakers or to this panel. So over to you, Mr. Fuchs.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this event, inviting us. Important and interesting event. On minimum wage, I would stress two things. This EU initiatives on this minimum wage is, I would say, the very important step after 30 years of fighting for, because we have EU ILO Directive or the Convention of Minimum Wage Fixing from 1970, and only 10 member states of the EU ratified this convention. And then later on we had many more initiatives like making work pay or the recommendation of active inclusion of people excluded from the labor market. Employment guidelines repeatedly mention this issue of wages and adequate wages in order to guarantee adequate standard of living and prevent poverty. So this was a logical step, especially after European Pillar of Social Rights was established 5 years ago. And with all that sensitivity which this step created in the Council, it is well known that in December, when Council adopted the general approach, there was overwhelming majority of member states who supported these initiatives and agreed the approach for negotiation with the Parliament. By that, I believe the Council and most member states confirmed how important this instrument and minimum wage is in eradication of poverty and in work poverty. For the group of our states, I would say in southern and eastern part of Europe, this matters even the second reason, because we understand that the issue of adequate wages and increasing wages is very important for achieving sustainable upward convergence of economic, social and economic conditions. When you look at the figures for last 2 years, you see, and the Eurofound recently confirmed that minimum wage, statutory minimum wage, was increased far by higher in the countries of Central and Eastern Europe by 5, 7, 10, even more percent, while in other Western and other parts of Europe, the increase was rather moderate by 2, 3%. So by saying that, I would confirm that this convergence is going on, is happening regardless of this directive. But this directive should support this process, we believe, if reasonably defined, of course, and they provide general framework with sufficient and necessary flexibility to member states in order to take into account each and every national social and economic conditions. The directive may fulfill the objective of eradication or reducing of in-work poverty. The Commission, in its impact assessment, indicated several numbers what it's expected from that, reducing in-work poverty and wage inequality by 10%. For example, if this hypothetical increase of minimum wage to 60% of gross median wage. Whether these objectives will fulfill, especially in the light of recent development and increased inflation, this is a question which needs to be seen in the years to come. So this is difficult to predict. But definitely, we believe that the directive, if adopted, will create a good business environment, will create space for gradual and predictable minimum wage increases, which is important for most member states, and at the same time should contribute to reduction of in-work poverty and inequality, which is increasing due to the structural changes of labor market and polarization of labor market in recent decades. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fuchs, and thank you also for speaking of the minimum wage as a means for sustainable upward convergence. And thanks for recognizing the importance of this step of the directive. There seems to be consensus around that, which is very, very positive. It's already a very good start. Perhaps handing over to Flaviana Theodosio from the European Commission. So the European Commission was initially proposing the directive, which has then been negotiated, obviously, along the way. If you want to react as well, you are welcome. But I also would like to already mention another question, which you can also react on if you so like. Considering that social service providers such as Caritas, we have been a last resource during COVID-19 for many families in vulnerable situations. And we also had limited resources and capacities. We continued to deliver, but there was, I think, along the way also a sense that there is an increased need for investing in social services. I think it became clear through the pandemic, even the more so, just how important social services are for people to ensure that they can live in dignity. They are complementary to all these measures we have been speaking of on the inclusion labor market. And how can we ensure that we better support the social service providers to enable them to support those in or at risk of poverty? So looking at inclusion from a little bit of a wider perspective, bringing in the importance of the inclusion in the labor market with the minimum wages we were speaking of, but also to ensure that we also look at this other side, which is the protection of those people who are not included in the labor market, and also ensuring that people can have access to social services if there is a need, regardless also of their situation, employed or unemployed. Would you like to react to any of this? It's quite open question, so your answer can also be quite open. And thank you for being with us, Flaviana.
Thanks a lot for inviting me, and thanks to the previous speakers for making such a positive case about the minimum wages directive. And also many thanks for the testimonials that you actually shared towards the beginning of the exchange. And I think that is very useful to have such, real situations and real voices brought into the policy debate. So it was very, engaging and motivating to listen to this. Now, going to your broad question indeed, let me just maybe pick up on a few things. I think that I'm coming from a social protection background, so I would rather bring maybe a complementary perspective as compared to what the previous speakers have covered. And also reflect back to what Commissioner Dalli and the president of Caritas have mentioned in terms of relevant initiatives for the social services sector that are either recently launched or will be launched in the coming year. Also, I will touch a bit, maybe a little bit upon a care strategy, because that's something that is my, let's say, it's the focus of my work in the long-term care team, because yes, I'm part of the social protection unit, but I'm specifically tasked with the coordination work for the European care strategy. So, a number of initiatives have been mentioned. The strategy for rights of the people with disabilities has been mentioned by Commissioner Dalli. And of course, with this one, we expect a major impact on services, on social services, on services supporting independent living, such as community-based support services. We also hope that integration will be boosted, integrated delivery will be boosted through the implementation of the strategy. And of course, digitalization and upskilling of the workforce are very important as well. Commissioner Dalli has also pointed to the upcoming package supporting dealing with employment of persons with disabilities and their link to the labor market. I didn't grasp whether the minimum income recommendation was mentioned by any of the speakers. There have been some technical issues, but just to say that this is, of course, as most of you know, also in the Commission work program for this year. I think it's mentioned for the fourth quarter, if I'm not mistaken. And with the minimum income recommendation that is now under a consultation stage, the objective is to continue the active inclusion approach, whereby we have a combination of provision of adequate income with access to the labor market, but very importantly, provision of enabling services. And here, indeed, the link with your work is easy to grasp. The social economy action plan has also been mentioned, and here with this one, we hope that there will be a positive impact on local social service providers, with many of them being also social economy enterprises. On this one, on the Commission side, there will be provision of further guidance and mutual learning in order in the area of public procurement, so that we basically support access to public procurement markets. Now, as concerns the funding for and the opportunity to have dialogue with civil society organizations, I think that first of all, looking at the big funds on ESF Plus, for instance, I would recall that member states are expected to work in partnership with all those involved in addressing job market and social needs, including the NGOs. And looking at the uncertainty and sometimes even lack of capacity and knowledge about how to access the different EU funding programs, the Commission helps to help tackle this through the establishment of a social services help desk that is supposed to help managing authorities use ESF and other funding for evidence-based social service intervention. Finally, and you are of course very aware of that because Caritas is also one of the beneficiaries through the EASY program. The Commission supports civil society organizations representing both service providers and users to engage and contribute to, on one hand, providing evidence for our social policy making, but also further disseminating the guidance from the Commission side to their national and regional level networks. So in terms of the big picture, maybe I would leave it at that. But I would also like to complement with a specific point, because COVID has been very much at the forefront of our discussion, and rightly so. But my observation and what I would like to bring in the discussion is that the Commission was very well aware of the changes that are occurring in the labor markets, and notably the rise and the prevalence of non-standard form of works and contracts before the pandemic hit. And we are aware that such situations are associated with lower access to social protection. So there is work actually predating the crisis that I would like to bring in the debate, and this work refers specifically to the Council recommendation on access to social protection for workers and self-employed. This is a Council recommendation which the Commission put on the table in 2018 and which was adopted in 2019. And it set policy guidance on formal coverage, on effective coverage, on adequacy and transparency of social protection. So now member states being requested to come up with national plans showing how they are actually implementing this recommendation. We see quite some traction. We see quite numerous examples of concrete reforms that are taking place in order to improve access to social protection for workers and persons in non-standard forms of work and self-employed. There's a long list of things, and the national plans are also public, the ones that were submitted. So I will not want to go into detail, but just to say, for example, extension of sickness benefits to self-employed, improving formal coverage for specific categories such as artists or platform workers or informal carers, or extension of paternity leave entitlements for the self-employed. All of these are examples of real reforms coming from France, Belgium, Romania, so that we see that there is actually buy-in, and if the political will is there, concrete improvements can happen on the ground. Now, what is, and I will close with this because I don't want to be too long. What is important is to acknowledge that some of these measures, most of these measures, were actually ad hoc measures taken to provide temporary support during the crisis. And in this moment, it's important to actually use them as a source of inspiration for structural changes in the social protection systems, so that they don't remain a one-off type of patch, but really have a real impact on the way that the social protection systems are designed in the member states. So we will review these plans, and you can expect from the Commission to have to present to the Council by the end of this year, by November actually 2022, a report as concerns the implementation of this recommendation, and potentially hinting how to take this this agenda forward. In addition, we have also started, and this has been announced in the action plan for the pillar, we have also created a high-level group on the future of work of social protection, really looking at the big picture and in a very sort of forward-looking way, reflecting about how to make social protection fit for the future in the context of the mega trends that are digitalization and demographic changes and the green transition. So also from this work strand, we can expect that the report that will come out by the end of this year also will bring also recommendations about how to make social protection systems better fit for to address the challenges of the new world of work that we all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for summarizing these different initiatives. Indeed, you were mentioning the help desk, the new funding stream, which will allow for facilitating access for social service providers to the European Social Funds Plus, and that's really something that we are very happy about as social service providers as Caritas. You were also referring to the minimum income, which is indeed something we were discussing a little bit earlier, and which is absolutely indispensable from our perspective if we are to ensure that every person has the basic safety net that they need in order to live in dignity. We would, as Caritas, very much like to see this as a binding framework. We know that is not yet part of the plan, but we very much believe that this would be absolutely essential. You were also speaking a bit about the essential workers that the pandemic have been really highlighting, but many of them have not had standard employment contracts. They have been having part-time contracts, temporary work, and they have therefore also had limited social protection. And you were mentioning also that the Commission recently introduced a proposal on platform workers. This doesn't cover all types of non-standard employment workers who were badly impacted by the pandemic. So how can we make our social protection systems more inclusive for all workers? And now I would like to pass back the floor to Saskia, if that is fine for you, to perhaps react on this as well. So how can we make our social protection systems more inclusive for all workers? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the previous exchanges, very interesting as well. Yes, well, I fully agree, and I think many people pointed the fact that we've treated these essential workers as heroes during the pandemic, but that many of them do not benefit a proper social security and contracts, as you mentioned, Maria. So I think that social security measures should be further extended to other workers in non-standard work forms, such as part-time workers and workers with fixed-term contracts. I also agree with Caritas, that this could be achieved through separate directives or guidelines for the individual groups concerns. For instance, regulating the social benefits of platform workers should be something to be urgently done. And of most immediate relevance will be the implementation of the national plans on accessing social protection and adapting social protection systems. And here again, the EU can really make the difference by tackling these issues proactively. Also, the social employers and EPSU apply for a European sectoral social dialogue committee for social services that should be launched in the coming weeks after the support shown by Commissioner Smith. There are nearly 12 million employees in social services across the EU 27 and the UK, and this number is still growing. 34% of care workers in healthcare and social work are 50 to 64-year-old. So the establishment of the Social Dialogue Committee is really urgent in our view to address the challenges in the sector, such as also staff shortages, which have been aggravated by the COVID-19 and also an aging population. So improving the working and wage conditions of the workers will be really key, and their recommendations should be taken up by the Commission and the co-legislators, since they will likely have financial consequences. It brings us to the need to ring-fence this social expenditure in the Stability and Growth Pact, and you know that the negotiations are coming, so it's I think a really important recommendation to take on board.
Thank you so much, Saskia. I'm sure that also you, Marina, you have some reactions and reflections on this.
Definitely. I think that, first of all, when we talk about essential workers, we have to take into consideration that many of them, most of them, are actually women. So, first of all, in order to make our social protection system more effective in including, in providing coverage when necessary to workers in these sectors, we have to keep into account the importance of the Gender Equality Directive on pay transparency in order to foster not only the formalization, the contractualization of workers in the crucial sectors, but also the necessary enhancement of the provisions that are applied to these workers. Women are still definitely less paid than men. This hampers their possibility to gain social security standards which are fair and acceptable, and basically they contribute to the their return in terms of rights. Enjoyment of rights is not even comparable to the contribution they give to the society. Then when it comes to social protection systems, the inclusiveness, of course, is provided first of all by the level of employment and of quality employment. More jobs of better quality, including a solid social security provisions must have to become a must across Europe. It is not acceptable any longer that there are forms of work that are simply not accompanied, where the wages are not accompanied by the allocation for protection. And secondly, beside the minimum income provisions, which are already have been already discussed, and that mostly are believed to pertain to people in working age, we insist on the establishment of fair minimum income for people in retirement age, because pensions across Europe are often much lower than the expectable levels of minimum income for people in working age at the moment. And secondly, we don't have to forget that when the European Pillar of Social Rights speaks about the right to social protection and to a decent income, it also prescribes the right of everyone, independently from the position of being a worker, and so the position of a person in the labor market, of decent and quality social and care services. So this is crucial, and for this I am sorry, but it is not sufficient that one member state acts in order to revise with a little make up its own social protection system. Here it is important a revision of the European economic governance that gives the financial room to all governments and all member states to concretely act for real inclusion. This is the moment the debate is on. The austerity, which is still being enacting by some rules that are by the time completely anachronistic, have to take place. The money that is necessary in each and every member state in order to guarantee services, housing, income, and dignifying provisions to all people have to be delivered and have to be considered as an investment from the economic and also especially the social point of view, because the binomius is too crucial to be ignored.
Thank you so much. And I will now ask a final question, but then I know that there are questions from the floor. So we were speaking a little bit about non-standard employment, but also the informal economy is present in almost all, if not all, European countries. And it's still very significant in some of those countries. So how can we ensure that we eradicate informal work in a human-centered way, which doesn't only focus on sanctioning the employers who violate the law, but also ensures safe transitions of these informal workers to formal contracts, and supports the regularization. Perhaps, if I may, I would like to hand over the floor to Mr. Fuchs for a quick reaction to this. Then I would also like to bring in Flaviana, but I know that there's also a question from the floor which you might be reacting to. So I will begin with Mr. Fuchs, please.
Sorry, not have time to reply to the previous questions, because as a forthcoming presidency, we are looking forward to all the package on care and all the recommendations which will come. I'm sorry that may come too late to be concluded by the end of our presidency, but we will work together with our Swedish colleagues and will give them over to conclude if necessary. On the informal work, I would say maybe I could provide a good example how to handle this. I don't want to talk about other countries. In Czech Republic, we established last year the special interministerial committee on a commission to fight against illegal or undeclared work or informal work, whatever you want to call it. Which involved both central government institutions, employment inspection services, police, even the intelligence services, social partners, national trade unions and employers, and academic sphere. And all these institutions together look for solutions how to handle the issue of the illegal employment of foreigners, undeclared or illegal work altogether, and also agency work, which is quite crucial topic on our labor market. And these groups, these experts work together and prepare the policy solutions and the draft legislation on this. So this might be a good example how to handle and to look for solutions. On the European level, I would refer to the European Labour Authority and its platform on undeclared work, because we very much happy that this body did not disappear with the ELA, and that a special working group has been established under the ELA. And in my information, according to my information, there has been just last year subgroup discussing the national approaches, how to handle the for example, regularization of informal work of third country nationals, the role of inspection authority, not in the field of sanctioning employers, but especially in preventive role of and the joint cooperation between inspection, police, for example, and other bodies, migration authority, and so on. And they together may analyze the problem of informal work or illegal work and look for solutions. And this platform in ELA provide a good opportunity for sharing good experiences and best practices in all countries, and motivate each and every member states to look for suitable solution, because it's difficult to find a solution one size fits all. The practices are different across Europe. So I see that there are possibilities how to handle this in a, as you said, a more human-centered solution apart from traditional sanctioning of employers.
Thank you so much, and also for bringing in that experience from the Czech Republic. Perhaps now we can take a couple of questions. I know there are already a couple of questions in the chat, so I will ask my colleague Lucy to read them out, and then we can take a couple of questions, and then I will let you react, please. And I know one of them is for you, Floriana, so I will give you the floor first, Flaviana. Yeah.
Thank you, Maria. So we have one comment from Amel Gmail from Untitled Europa. So he said that he would like to reinforce Marina's Monaco's message, and that their demand at Untitled Europa is the urgent need to promote and ensure pay increases to make sure that workers can live in dignity and have at least a decent standard of living. Stronger collective bargaining and higher minimum wages are key, And we call for the support of the European governance for a robust directive on adequate minimum wages to contribute to this aim. And one of our key concerns is pay inequalities, a reality in all member states, and that is why we need a strong gender pay transparency. A directive that eliminates the threshold for employer pay reporting obligations, enforces the principle of equal pay for work of equal value. Okay, and then I have a couple of questions in the Q&A section. The first one is from Fernando Mahuenda. Thank you for your question. So she's written that the testimonies we provide indicates that people are excluded because people and institutions exclude them. So a lot of it is to do with prejudice and discrimination. How can the European institutions combat prejudice and convince actors in the labor market not to exclude people?
How can you do that? So Flaviana, would you like to react first, perhaps to this briefly, and then I'll also give the floor to others who may wish to react.
Sorry, I'm manipulating here different buttons and windows. So I would like just to complement first my quick reaction in the chat regarding the energy prices, because I started answering in the chat, but then I realized maybe it's better to actually speak a little bit about, just to recall us all that in the European Pillar of Social Rights, there is a principle which, okay, it's the last one, it's not for sure the least important, which is about access to essential services. And here this principle says that everyone has the right to essential services of good quality, including water, sanitation, energy, transport, financial services, and digital communications. As far as I'm aware, but again, this is information that maybe I should double check and reconfirm. The Commission has committed in the action plan, so this is a public commitment that we would come out with a report by the end of this year on access to essential services. So I would expect that there's some stock taking and even a sort of a presentation of the next steps as concerns the challenges in this area. Now, as concerns the informal undeclared work discussion, I would just maybe also like to bring in a terminological clarification, because for us, coming from the long-term care background, informal carers are not the same with undeclared workers. Informal carers are those who provide care to somebody in their environment. They are most often a parent or a relative, but they are not hired and they do not receive remuneration. This is very different from the undeclared work. The topic of undeclared work is really broad, and I think make most sense if I would zoom in the things that I know best, and that is the situation in the care sector, because generally in the sector of, let's say, in the PHA sector, in the personal and household services sector, we have a share of undeclared work which is roughly above 50%. So basically, we have around 6 million workers who are declared, and then somewhere between 6.8 and 9 million workers who work in black. So who are these people? They are women, and this brings me back to the points of other speakers who pointed to the gender dimension that comes through from all points. They are unemployed or underemployed individuals, and they are also third country nationals or migrants. About 6 of them are so. Things that work in terms of policy responses to try to ensure safely transitions from the status of undeclared workers into the formal workforce. I think that the best type of policy response is a holistic approach, where you have, in a way, a direct approach where you try to reduce the costs and increase the benefits of operating on a declared basis, like, for instance, deterrence. But incentives are much more important. Simplifying compliance, voucher schemes, direct and indirect taxations. These are things that are known to work. And generally, in the long-term care sector, I think that undeclared work is the most common in countries where the wages are higher and where the LTC entitlements are limited or consist primarily of cash payments. And there is a large percentage of domestic long-term care workers. I think that experience shows that reforms of member states show that these challenges can be tackled by incentives such as subsidies for long-term care, which are conditional on a transparent use of the subsidies received, voucher schemes, and non-bureaucratic registration procedures for carers. So this would be just a few ideas coming from the experience that we have at hand about potential policy responses.
Thank you so much, Flaviana. I would like to give just 1 minute, if that is fine, to Saskia, to Marina, to Miroslav, for a reaction to these questions, or perhaps some final remark you would like to make. And then I would like to give also the possibility to those present in the room, and those present, of course, also virtually. If you also have any questions to the previous speakers, then feel free to raise them as well. We are coming close to an end, but we still have that short opportunity. But first, 1 minute each, if that's fine, starting with Saskia.
Thank you. Yes, there are many interesting questions in the chat, and I fully agree with Amel Jemail. Sorry if I pronounce it badly. I fully agree with your approach, and I fear that the current directive and the negotiation trilogue will fall short in the real objective, actually, to fight against poverty, because we need, of course, to have a common approach when it comes to the minimum wage needed to take people out of poverty, and this is not truly met yet in the negotiations. So there are still many challenges ahead to have this objective met. On Fernando's question, I think there's a huge challenge fighting against the invisibilization of poverty, of in-work poverty also. And I think it's Gasha that mentioned that some people declined actually to testimony today because of the fear of reprisal. And this is highly shocking. In 2022, that people in poverty still don't dare to speak out. I think homeless people are also not visible enough. And also, yeah, in work poverty is still unknown. So work as you do today needs to be continued and done, and of course also through collective bargaining. Reinforcing collective bargaining is really important to me in all the countries, and Europe should really push for that also in the current directive on minimum wage, also including people in the decision-making process. This is highly lacking at national level, at European level. I think we work with institutions, but institutions, as you mentioned, still contribute actually to making this situation invisible. So I really think that we should work on the inclusion of people in the decision-making process.
Thank you so much, Saskia Bricmont. And just very final remark, perhaps from also Marina Monaco and Miroslav Fuchs. Do you have one last short comment or remark to make? Please, Marina.
Thank you. Well, I think that it is very, very important to foster the work of the platform against undeclared work. Undeclared work makes in Europe the equivalent of several member states' GDPs. And it is not only a matter of providing workers with protection, providing a social protection system with the necessary fuel to put into a positive and proactive circle the wealth, the societal wealth that is at the moment stolen by undeclared work. It has to be clear that workers are never illegal, are never they are the victims of a system of systems that basically encourages that. We also have to approach a very highly comprehensive set of tools. And under this point of view, we have to take into consideration that undeclared work, especially in the care sector, means also lack of specialization, of qualification, of training, of fuel into sectors that can potentially be not only highly useful for the European economy, but also highly rewarding for the European societies. So under this point of view, we do believe that encouraging and even forcing where necessary, because actually undeclared work represents an economic advantage for certain subjects. Fostering the formalization of work across Europe can represent an incredible high increase of human, societal, and economic resources.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm conscious of time. Just one very short remark from Miroslav Fuchs. If there's something burning question now also for Caritas, please feel free to raise them by raising your hands for those who are here physically, or by flagging it. We will also stay on after this event, so please also feel free to come towards us. A final comment to Miroslav, please.
Difficult, which one would be the best at the end? Just a reaction to the comments in the chat. Yes, collective bargaining is important and is part of debate on minimum wage. On the other hand, when we see the situation in Europe last decades or 2 decades, when decreasing the coverage of collective bargaining, decreasing the trade union membership and density of employers association, it will be a challenge for all member states, and we believe that the action plan, which is envisaged in Article 4 of the proposed directive, could be the solution how to promote future better and deeper collective bargaining in order to safeguard the adequate minimum wage across Europe. And on the energy poverty, yes, discussion is going on within the debate on the Council recommendation of just transition towards climate neutrality, where the prices, increasing energy prices, are one of the issue, how to be handled at the national level, because there is not much space on EU level so far how to handle this. So it is the part of debate also on the ministers level recently in the French informal EBSCO. So discussion is ongoing as far as I know so far, without any conclusive decision. And I agree also with Flavia what you said. Oh yes, undeclared work is not always informal work. I agree with you what you suggest, which is the way how to make informal care more formal. There are steps in social security and so on. So
thank you. I hear you also referred back to Flavia, and I see you have your hand raised. So I give 30 seconds to you now, and then I will close the meeting. Thank you so much to the panelists, to Flaviana Teodosio, to Miroslav Fuchs, to Marina Monaco, to Saskia Bricmont. Thanks to those who sent the questions through the chat. So one very final comment to you, Flaviana.
Thank you. It is not a comment, it is just an announcement that I would very much like to make, because the care strategy has been referred once and again in our conversation, but I didn't really get the chance to say that there will be the call for evidence published at the end of February on the Have Your Say website of the Commission. And I'm sure you are aware in Caritas, because you are invited, there will be targeted stakeholder dialogues with a range of stakeholders, including yourselves, to shape up the initiative. So this is just to say, watch the space for more on the care strategy.
Thank you so much, and we will be very happy to contribute to that. So I'd like to thank all the speakers. Yes, and I'm checking if there was some final urgency question coming in. So I want to thank all the speakers today for your very valuable contributions to this debate, and to the participants for participating with us in the room or remotely. COVID-19 has transformed work for all of us, but we have heard today how it has proven to be particularly challenging for specific groups, those who were already facing difficulties integrating to the labor market before, and also had more challenges in maintaining work and to ensuring decent conditions. So Caritas has been able to ease the burden for some of those who have been struggling through the pandemic. And now we have been discussing through some of the possible steps ahead to ensure that we can go towards inclusive labor markets. Caritas seeks to be a catalyst for positive change, and we remind all stakeholders what an inclusive labor market really looks like. And our contribution today is this publication, which we very much hope that will also be useful for you in your work as we go ahead. We want to see protected, supported, and empowered workers, women, men, young people, older people from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of walks in life. So let's keep that conversation. We want to remain partners. We want to work with you, with policymakers, with social service providers, with all of the partners, with the people themselves. And that's really, as I said in the beginning, we are trying to put the human face to the people who have been so exposed and so facing so many challenges throughout the pandemic. So let's keep this conversation. And also I want to tell you that there will be an evaluation form being sent in the chat. So please do respond to that as well. And now we are available. There is a small drink for those who are lucky enough to be with us physically. For all others, we say thank you so much for joining us virtually. And it was a pleasure to have this conversation with you this morning. Thank you so much. And I want to end by just saying a very huge thank you to those who have been preparing this event. There were many colleagues involved. There were our members involved very heavily. I also invite you to look at the 18 national poverty reports that our members have been producing. And a final thank you really goes to my colleague Lucy, who is in the back of the room, but who should really be here because you have been the most important person, I think, in the room to ensure that this event came about. So thanks so much. And thanks for everyone who's been contributing also to our researchers and to our members. Thank you. Bye.